Hello, beautiful soul, and welcome to another episode of Intuitive Creator Spotlight, where amazing guests share their stories of how they transform their lives and how they're helping other people now transform their lives too. I am Stella, your host, and if you're new to our channel, please take a moment to subscribe, let us know your thoughts, and like this video as you're watching it. Today, we have a super special guest, Subhan. He is a dedicated classical Hatha Yoga teacher who is here to share some incredible insights about the true essence of yoga. Hi, Subhan. Welcome to this episode.
Thanks for having me, Stella. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is a joy to create this episode with you because I know that your story is very inspiring and we all have a story to share and every story is unique, but I do know that you have so much to bring into this world, especially when it comes to yoga. So I'm very curious to hear more about your stories and your path and journey. So can you please share with us, because I know you started your spiritual practices at a very, very young age. How did that happen, and what kind of practices were some of your first ones?
Yeah, well, that's down to my father, I would say. And yeah, so being born into an Indian family, and I was born in the UK, but to an Indian family. And my parents, I would say my father was more spiritual. My mother was a little bit more religious in the beginning, in the early stages. And my father was the one who actually gave me, something to do. I would always see my parents do something we had like a dedicated space for the spiritual practice. And so I always see my parents do some kind of practice. And then, eventually it was something that I wanted to do. And then I guess my father saw that, and then he sat me down in a cross-legged posture, and then he gave me my first practice. And the first practice was japa. So japa is a way of using a mantra, and generally you would use some kind of beaded necklace. So it's very similar to other cultures, but this is a specific one called a rudraksh, and it would have 108 beats. So you would do like a chant 108 times, is in one cycle of it. So that was the first practice, and it was the first kind of closed-eyed practice I'd done when I was 3 or 4 years old,
Wow.
and I just did it. I was so happy to have one, and I just did it every day. And I did notice the difference. I noticed I felt good from the practice, but at the same time, I didn't think I wanted to do it for that. It was just something that I was given a practice, and I did it. And I did it for almost 10 years, all the way up until my teenage years.
Mm.
So that really, was I'm sure that had like a huge impact, even though I was just doing it without really thinking.
And as a child, toddler, and then
Mm.
going into your like teenage years, all of that time, I can imagine it must maybe it wasn't like the easiest to go through that chant, right? To have the patience to stay still. Did that help you to kind of just monitor your emotions or navigate through certain situations?
You mean outside of the practice?
Like as you were doing that practice, did that practice help you with your daily life, like to stay more calm, or in what kind of ways did that help you?
It's interesting because as a child, I was none the wiser for what the practice was doing to me.
Oh,
And
okay.
that was the interesting thing because, I was given a practice and I just did it every day, morning and evening. I did it twice a day. So, I would do it and then I would be a child
Mm.
as I was growing up. So I had no idea of what it was doing to me. However, I just still did it for some reason. I just did it. And
Now looking back, what do you think it did for you?
yeah, I think looking back, that laid a foundation for me,
Mm.
what I, did later in life. So, and knowing more about how these things work, obviously, these kind of practices, they reorganize your energies in such a way. So, as you're even growing and developing, there's a certain stability and foundation that a practice like this can give you. So, it gave me a platform unconsciously, I didn't know what was happening, but now I look at my, journey and story and see what happened later on. I'm sure that had a massive part of, what to do with what happened later on in life.
And I know that later on, and in your teenage years, everything changed for you. How and what changed?
I think just being a teenager.
Mm.
So, growing up in East London, it was, it's a crazy place, and where I grew up was one of the poorest places in England at that time. It had the worst hospitals, worst schools, everything like this, and it was a lot of angst around, and obviously peer pressure. You're just joining in with everything. So yeah, I just went totally the opposite direction. Pretty much became an atheist and rejected everything. Rejected anything to do that looked remotely religious or anything like that. And I just went and had fun as a teenager, and that was also an important part of my journey to go totally the opposite way.
What do you think your lessons were
Mm.
through that phase of your life?
I think for me, in terms of lessons, I don't know how I would describe it if it was lessons, but what it gave me was insight.
Mm.
So I was living my life this way. And then actually, I do remember one of the things that really planted the doubt in me about this kind of spiritual way and, or, whatever you want to call it, of living was, grew up with a belief in gods and things like this. And somebody said, well, why are you doing all of that? What impact does it have? And all of these things. And I thought, well, yeah, actually, that's true. So when I went the opposite direction, it just showed me a different life. It's like, well, okay, I'm completely free. I can just do whatever I want, and I'm just enjoying myself. And it was just insight into, okay, well, this is this life, you know.
Mm.
So I don't see anything as good or bad. It was just a different perspective on life, and I needed that as well.
Mm. Yes, because you kind of you have a perspective on that kind of level. And by the way, was it what you expected or was it different?
No, I mean, I didn't have any expectations.
No.
Like it was one of those things. Okay, I'm letting go that now, and I'm living like this, and this kind of makes more sense here.
Mm.
Why do I need to look at all of these other things? Why do I need to do a spiritual practice? Let me just go out, have fun, and be me, whatever I thought me was at that time.
Yes, and then in this human experience, we go through a lot of like explorations, and we really want to understand, like, how do I resonate with this?
Yeah,
Even when you taste different kind of food, in order
yeah,
for you to know which one you like, you have to taste
yes,
different types of food. So in life, we go through so many different stages and experiences as well. So now you went from, a household where you were encouraged to practice like spirituality, and then you went through this phase of your life. What happened for you to
mm,
want to come back to spirituality? What was that moment when you knew, actually, I'm ready to shift things again?
yeah, yeah. Well, that's an interesting one because my mum was having her own journey. And like I said, initially she was religious, and it was more about going to the temples. We, grew up in a Hindu family, so it was going to the temples, doing the rituals, and just following it in a religious manner. And I guess my spirituality was tainted with that as well, because I thought, well, okay, it's religion. Then she shifted when she met a specific, like an Indian group. Her name was Amma. She's known as the hugging saint, and she does these. She visits different countries. So she came to the UK every year. So my mum started discovering her when I was around, say, 11, 10, 11, something like this. So I would go along with her every year, mostly because that was the only time she let me off school. So I was like, okay, I don't have to go to school. Okay, great, let's go. And then when I first went to see Amma, I was very curious. I didn't know what it was. My mum was telling me these things. My mum had a huge experience, a massive experience, and it scared the hell out of me. I didn't know what was happening with her. And then I went, and and the way it goes with Amma is she gives her blessings through a hug. So that's why she's known as the hugging saint. So I went and I got the hug, which is known as a darshan, and nothing really happened. So I didn't really get it, but I went anyway because it was a day of school. So year after year, when I went and nothing would happen, and then I think when I was about 15, I was like, okay, well, we'll just leave it there. I'll just do the routine. I had my friends there, so I'll just go and get my hug, and then I'll go and sit find my friends. I just treated it that way. So when I was 15, it was like that. And then what they allowed was they used to let younger people go first. So I just went into the queue as a priority. And then something was different that year. That year, I was in the queue and I started feeling something. And I thought, what is that? That's interesting. And it was in my chest. And I thought, is this what people have been talking about? So I just paid attention to it. And as I got further in the queue, that feeling started growing. I thought, okay, this is definitely something. I can definitely feel something. And then, I was getting closer and closer, and this feeling was just growing and growing. And I was like, what on earth is this? As I got closer to Amma, that feeling became so overwhelming. I wanted to cry, and then I was just like, okay, I'm a 15-year-old boy. Okay, that's enough now. We're not crying. We're not doing anything. We'll leave it there. And then I was just fighting back the tears. This feeling was just too overwhelming. And then I went and got my hug, and it was the experience was like an explosion of ecstasy. That's the only way I could describe it. And obviously I cried. I couldn't hold back the tears at that point. And then as I came out of the hug, Amma told me to sit next to her. So I was just like, okay, I sat next to her, and I remember looking at the world, and the world just looked different. People looked different. Just even the walls looked different. The colors looked different. Everything was just so much more alive. And I was just staring at all this, thinking, what on earth is going on? You know?
Mm.
And then so I sat there for what I thought was 10 minutes, and I thought, okay, I'm just going to get up and go now. And I looked at my watch, and over an hour had passed. And I
Wow.
was like, what? I couldn't comprehend it. My sense of reality had just been distorted, because it was just like, no, I sat there only for 10 minutes, and the whole hour had gone. So I was just really freaked out, to be honest. I was scared because I didn't even know such a thing existed. And then I just experienced it. All I knew was what I experienced of the world. And so I just left it initially, just went back the next year to see the same thing happened. It didn't happen. And I thought, well, maybe I don't know what that was. And I just left it. I didn't tell my mum anything. Then 3 years later, I saw a documentary, and this documentary was made by Louis Theroux, a
Mhm.
famous British documentary maker, and he used to make the Wild Weekends. So right, he used to go and do. So he did one on Indian spirituality, and where he wanted to see why Westerners were going to India to find themselves. So he did a whole documentary on it, and he went there, visited different ashrams and different gurus and things like this. And he visited Amma's ashram initially, and then after he visited Amma's ashram, he was like, okay, and he just kind of moved on. And then he went around everywhere, and then got to the end of the documentary, and it was like, I get it logically, I understand it, but I don't think there's anything to this spirituality stuff. So he left. He started going to the airport, and you can see, I'm sure it's on BBC. He left. He goes to the airport, and then as he's going to the airport, he's seeing pictures of Amma everywhere, and
Mm.
realized Amma was in the same town he was in, and that she was on the way to the airport. So they decided to just go and see her one more time. But this time they arranged a hug for him. And then you can see, the video footage of him going, and he's narrating over it. And he literally says, I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was the crush of the crowd, but something amazing happened. And then he came out, and I could see his face. And I was like, I recognize that face. That's the exact
Mm.
same face I had. And then they were trying to talk to him to ask him what happened, and he just blown away. He couldn't really speak. Just kept saying it was an incredible hug. And then I was like, I that's exactly what happened to me. And it was that validation was like, okay, I'm not crazy. You know, there is something here. I've experienced it. He's experienced it, and that's what made me seek. What is
Mm.
that experience? What how is it that we're having an experience? Why what is it that's different to our regular experience, and that gives us, and all the questions came, and that's when I started really seeking as a spiritual seeker, reading all the books, listening to talks, and
Mm. You have experienced it, he experienced it, and so many other people as well. I remember seeing this person. I didn't remember her name, but I remember seeing like videos or parts of documentaries. But
yeah,
thank you so much for sharing this here, because maybe those who are watching us, maybe they needed to hear this message and go and look up this person as well, and just look at what this means, and also the documentary. Because I think these are fascinating moments. And more than that, it was clearly something for you to just have this constant, I'm going to go back there, I'm going to go back there, even if at the logical level I was like, maybe, what am I doing here, you know?
yeah,
But then there was something that invited your soul to go back and have that hug. What a super, super special and magical experience.
mm,
So when you connect with people in this way,
mm,
when you experience something with a person on
mm,
this planet, on this earth, what do you think is happening when you have these strong emotions,
mm.
these feelings of like, I lost track of time, I experienced something fascinating? What do you think actually happens?
That's a juicy question. I think obviously when we are born into the physical world, we have a certain perception of it through our five senses. And, there's something in Indian spirituality, right, where they talk about the world is Maya, the whole world is Maya, Maya meaning illusion. And, you know, does that mean the world doesn't exist? Well, no, it exists. We can see it. But what it's alluding to is our perception of the world is distorted because the moment we're born into the physical, we're seeing everything through the five senses. The five senses are always just outward, just taking information from the outside and process for our survival. So we're looking at the world through a window of survival. So that means if you look at it through the window of survival, you're not seeing the world as it is. You're not seeing everything that is there to perceive. So when a experience like that happens, it just distorts the physical world just enough for you to see something beyond what we perceive through our five senses. It's just a little window into that to well, show you that there is more to it. I don't know if show you is the right word, but you see it.
You're invited to see it. This is a gift, isn't it? It is
Yeah.
a gift, and especially for the human existence that we're in, it
Mm,
is a gift to be able to see something like that with the
yeah.
physical eyes. And even if it's just for a moment, for a few seconds, it is incredible. And
Mm,
to go through these experiences, to understand the energies around us, and that there is a meaning that we might not necessarily understand like with our logic, but then to go deeper into that and just feel, absorb, and go through it. It's something absolutely fascinating. And thank you for sharing this message, because I think it's
yeah.
absolutely beautiful. So when you realize that clearly there is something in you that
Mhm.
invites you to see the world differently, invites you to see the universe and everything that is out there and within yourself at the same time. How did you process this information? Because I know it was that moment when you had the strong sensation physically when you received the hug, and then you saw the documentary. How
Mm.
did you then process everything that happened for you?
Yeah. Like I said, it was the seeking. After
Yeah.
that, I needed to know, what happened, what happens, how does this happen? And so then I really, started reading the books and, reading books from spiritual masters and trying in and even, going back to certain books like you know, some of the scriptures in Indian, what I hate to say religion, because religion is a very distorted word and it means a lot of things to a lot of people. But just that Indian spirituality, so the Vedas are like some of the big scriptures and texts. So that those were some of my go-to places. However, it was very dense, and so then I needed to read interpretations of that from different masters as well. And then, I had a childhood friend who was going through a very similar experience. He was someone I used to speak to a lot and converse with about this. He also used to come and see Amma as well, and he had his own experience with Amma. And so yeah, it was just what happened was I turned into a seeker.
Mm.
That's what I would say happened.
That's amazing, and it is inspiring as well because that's a case of like, hey, once you feel something, pay attention, be
Mm,
curious, and go with it, and from that place of love. So I know that in 2005 you discovered yoga. What happened?
yeah.
How did you discover yoga then?
Yeah, interesting. Two things happened in 2005. So I had my second big experience with Amma that
Mm-hmm.
year, and that opened me up a little bit. However, the yoga side of it was my mother actually telling me to go to a yoga program. And up until that point, I was interested in spirituality, more into meditation, without really understanding what yoga was, other than, it's some kind of practice. And I knew there was this connection with spirituality and yoga. And I knew the stories, or some stories of yogis, some incredible yogis that have lived in the past. So I had some interest in yoga. My mum said there's a program happening here and go and see it. So I went along and not really thinking anything, and just went in and I sat down, and we didn't do a single yoga posture. It was that really hit me, and all we learned was, it was a discourse, and then we learned certain ways of breathing. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. And then as the days went on, we got initiated into a yogic practice, which was known as a Kriya Yoga. Now, Kriya means your internal energy. So it's a yoga of mastering your internal energy.
Mm.
So it's a seated practice. And it blew my head off when I got initiated into this practice. And I remember I went with my next door neighbor, and we were like, "What on earth just happened there? What is this? And where's the yoga in this?" Because up until that point, I thought yoga was a physical practice. It's only
Mm-hmm.
then where I realized there was more to yoga than that. And then, having gone through that program, I just started practicing, this particular practice, and then I started going down this road of yoga, and then eventually that led me to find who became my actual guru, because that was from a different Indian guru, if you want. And then I found Sadhguru after that. And then once I found Sadhguru, I just really engaged with his talks. And the funny thing was, up until that point, I read so many books, and I thought I had it all figured out.
Mm.
I thought, right, I've got it figured out. I don't really need to listen to anybody else. I've listened to everyone there is to listen to. And my mum said, "Oh, you should listen to this guy." I said, "Oh, I'm good." But then it just so happened that she was watching him one day, and then I came down to, for breakfast, but not for
Yeah.
anything else, for breakfast. But because my mum was watching it, I thought, okay, I have to sit down and watch this now. And what he said hit me, and I was just like, okay, well, that's different. That's interesting. That's a different way of looking at things. So then, when the same situation repeated itself, I was more willing to listen to what he said. And then the second time I listened to him, he left me in tears. I can't remember what he said though, but whatever he said, he left me in tears. And I was just like, I've got to listen to this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, it was on some obscure channel on Sky Television, and it came on once a week on Sunday morning. So every morning, even if I went out the night before, because I was still pretty young, I was still in my early 20s, doing all of that stuff. then didn't matter what time I came home, I'll wake up and I'll watch that, and that's my introduction into, you know, Sadhguru, who I basically went and started learning from after that.
Mm. Is this where you discovered Hatha Yoga as well?
Yeah, eventually. So
Eventually.
yeah, so Sadhguru also teaches Kriya Yoga as well, and that was his main thing, was Kriya Yoga. So I learned his practice. I got initiated, because with Kriya Yoga you have to be initiated into the practice. It's not just some instructions you learn. It's something that has to go deeper. So then there's a process of initiation for that. So you get initiated into that process, and then I started practicing that, and then saw huge benefits in my life. I saw huge benefits from the other practices as well, but I just went down this road and learning and doing more programs with him, because every time I did, it just peeled off a layer.
Mm.
And I just saw the improvement in my life, just because I was working 9 to 5 back then. And initially, I would go to work, I would come back, and my general way of living was I couldn't do anything. I was so tired from work. I'd just sit and watch TV, and I was just living for the weekend. And then all of a sudden, after I started doing these practices, I noticed that after a day's worth of work, I was still having lots of energy, and I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to sit on the sofa. And what I noticed was my eyes were open to opportunities. So the
Mm.
things that I was thinking that I want to do, like, oh yeah, I love to learn a martial art. Oh yeah, I'd love to play football. They were just ideas. But because my energy was so much, it was heightened, and I had all this energy after work, they weren't thoughts anymore. I was actually seeing opportunities to do them. So as soon as I thought of it, I was doing it. And it was effortless. It wasn't something that, oh, I want to do it. It was just happening. So before I knew it, every evening was, I was either learning salsa, or I was, learning a martial art, I was playing football, and then I was still, meeting friends and socializing on the weekends. And my life just completely flipped, and I just felt alive. I just went from living this mundane life to just jumping into life. And so it was just an eye opener for me. This is
Wow.
actually how you should be. You should just be jumping into everything.
Yeah, and then everything is connected. Your physical health, spiritual being, and just the mental health as well. Because then we know we all went through COVID and stuff like that, lockdowns, and now we are kind of getting back to realigning our lives with routines that resonate with us now. And this is a great reminder from what you shared right here that it is so important to look at what kind of routine
Mm,
connects with you, your body, and then to just maintain that energy because yes, this body is the vehicle for us in this lifetime. But then if we want to continue to create amazing things, we need to be able to generate the energy to
yeah.
navigate through this lifetime and then to also be able to do all of these activities. I can
Mm,
only imagine how many things you've learned by doing all of those activities because you kind of create new neural pathways in your brain as well, which is also fascinating.
mm.
So, how did you eventually decide to step into Hatha Yoga and then teach others? Because I know you are now a Hatha Yoga teacher.
I would say classical Hatha Yoga teacher.
Yes, that
That's quite an
classical Hatha
important
Yoga teacher.
distinction.
Tell us about that. Tell us
Yeah,
why is it classical specifically?
sure. Yeah. So initially, I did learn some Hatha Yoga with Sadhguru, but he was not training teachers, because
Hmm.
he only taught you just enough for the meditation processes. So it was a preparation for that. And then he started talking about that he wanted to train Hatha Yoga teachers. And the reason why he never went into that was because there was so much of it around, and he didn't want to get into that. And he said specifically, right now, the issue is more the mind than the body, whereas historically it was more the body rather than the mind. So because of that, he didn't really want to go into Hatha Yoga. However, he saw so many distortions compared to what the classical version of it was, that he realized he needed to, a lot of aspects of Hatha Yoga were being forgotten. And to bring them back, we just needed to create something totally new. And that's when he started training teachers. And then for me, that was something of interest to me. So yeah, in terms of just kind of explaining where all this is, so most people when they say yoga, they actually mean hatha yoga, because yoga itself is a much bigger thing. It's a whole, it's a series of practices, yes, but the word yoga actually, I think most people know means union. But what that union is talking about is a certain state. It's a certain state of being. So yoga actually is not a practice that you do, it's something that you become. And within that, there's a whole science of how to do that, including certain practices. And one of those practices is the physical side. There are many other sides to it. One of them is the physical side. So the physical side is known as hatha yoga, which is the science of yoga. Now, or the science of posture, science of physical posture, using physical posture to become yoga. Now, the problem is most people think hatha yoga is a style of yoga, which is not true. Every time you do physical practice of yoga, that is hatha yoga. It's just that there are certain schools of yoga. So when you talk about your vinyasas or iyengas, all of these, they come from a certain school of yoga, from a certain person. So those are the different types of hatha yoga, but somewhere it got distorted that, oh no, hatha yoga is one style, and this is another style, and that is another style. No, it's all the asana practice, the physical practice is all hatha yoga. Now, on top of that, when we say classical hatha yoga, the distinction is we're saying classical because we're talking yoga in its most original form. Now, most of these practices were always passed through a lineage. That historically, that's what happened. Yoga is thousands and thousands and thousands of years old. We say in yoga, we say minimum of 15,000 years ago, the
Wow.
story of yoga. Now, which obviously freaks out archaeologists because that doesn't match up with their thing. And we say minimum because actually it goes we in history and the tradition of yoga, it says even up to 40,000 years ago. And now archaeology is starting to catch up. Now they're starting to find human bones that are dating back 40,000 years ago. So there is some catch up, but still, it's still something that people can't understand. So yeah, so yoga, the story of yoga started very, very long time ago, and it was always passed down. It was an oral tradition, so it was passed down through voice. Nothing was ever written down. And the reason why it's done that way is because you're using your awareness to perceive what is being given by, whoever the guru or the master is. And so it's been passed down so that nothing gets distorted. The moment you write something down, now it's all open to interpretation. Whoever reads it will have their own perception of it. And
Mm.
then that's when things start getting distorted. You can see that with many, spiritual traditions, particularly religions, this has happened over the years. So to bring back the original way of doing yoga, this is why classical hatha yoga. So it is yoga in its purest form, including how we teach it. So there is no notes taking. It's all back to the oral tradition, which freaks out the logical mind. Every single workshop that I do, people come, and that's the thing that always comes up. And I have to say, just stay with this, stay with the process, what we're going through, because we don't want you to use that part of the mind. We want you to use other parts of your mind and your being to be able to receive a practice like this.
And it's fascinating the level of your beautiful soul's awareness to understand that you have the energy to pass this on to other people because it takes a certain level of courage. And also, I guess when you embrace a mission like this, it's kind of like I decide I'm going to do this for a long time. You can't just come in and play with it and then exit. It doesn't, I mean, yes, you grow, you evolve, you have more experience, you do it in different ways, but then it's not like you step in and out, in and out. And this is commitment, isn't it? It's a huge commitment to do something like that. So if you were to think about people who are attracted to classical hatha yoga, who are these people and why do they need to come into your space?
I mean, it's a wide range of people who come. Um, I guess generally most people who are coming to a classical hatha yoga workshop generally are people who want to go deeper into the spiritual aspect, mm, get connected with the roots of yoga, and have an experience of that. They want to go beyond more the physical side because most of the time, when you see yoga, it's usually described as a physical stretch, and people are more focused on the physical feelings and the physical stretches, and which is fine, that I'm sure there are benefits to that. But if you want to go deeper, if you want a transformative experience, then that's when classical hatha yoga comes. And this is why we don't actually do classes. I don't do weekly classes. You need to come and spend a whole weekend receiving this essentially and going through a certain process, because we don't want this to go into your intellectual head. We want this to go into your very being.
I can totally relate to that because in everything, every kind of practice that you decide to go deeper into that practice, it
Mhm.
is not enough to look at it for 30 minutes and then go and have a
Yeah,
party after that.
yeah,
It's like, yeah, you go to parties, but then it's like spending a
mhm,
considerable amount of time in that space and energy in order to start feeling the effects. And some of those effects might not be immediate.
yes,
But like you said, I love how you said that you just have to trust the process. You have
yeah.
to trust the process because then changes can happen in months or sometimes years, depending when the person is ready, right?
The nature of this is very subtle, but that's
Mm,
the aspect of you that you want to move. Is the subtler aspects of yourself. The physical aspect, you can do it in a few weeks. You just work on it and that happens. But the subtler practice, the subtler aspect of yourself, that's A, that takes time, but B, you also need to develop your awareness so that
mhm,
you can be aware of what is happening. And a lot of the time, even myself included, when I first went into all of this, especially, with Sadhguru, I had massive spiritual experiences with him. And they were just, some of them were just really earth shattering experiences. However, it took me a long time to understand that those experiences were great, but how much am I actually growing as a being? So it's only when in those moments where I saw a different response in myself in a certain situation. So, for example, I'm in a place and something happens, and I know how I would usually react in that situation. And naturally, that wasn't there all of a sudden. Growth, there's a shift, something is working. So, it was the smaller things that made me realize, okay, this is working. The experiences are great, I love them, but how much are you actually growing as a being?
mhm. It is the process of self-reflection and processing everything, becoming aware of where you're at, your environment, the changes. And thank you for bringing this example of like, hey, how this happens, and the example of like, hey, maybe you have reacted in a specific way all the time, and then suddenly something shifts.
Yeah.
It's just easy. And it's easy when you're ready for that change. But
Mhm.
in order to be ready for that change, you have to put in the work, which is not
It
fun.
doesn't exactly. It doesn't happen overnight, and yeah, and it's it's almost like a lonely process because you don't know what's going on. But like you said, self-reflection and being aware of what is happening day to
Mm,
day. So because there are no milestones when you're on the spiritual path. You have no idea. You can have these experiences, but are you growing as a being? That you have to really pay attention to the smaller things.
mm. Yes, absolutely. To everyone who's watching us, please check out the description of this video to know how you can connect with Shubhan and his teachings and his work. You might watch this video immediately after we post it or years from when we recorded the video. So make sure you look at what he's working on at the moment when you're watching this video and know how to connect with him. And now, as we are wrapping up this episode, for those who are on their spiritual journey and they're thinking, okay, how can I, like, what would be one step that I can do today or in my immediate future to improve my life, to improve my practice? What kind of advice would you give them?
So what I would say, breath is everything. In yoga, breath is everything. The breath will tell you where you are at any given moment. So there are, and I can even post the video, there are practices that you can do, simple practice that you can do, which will help you to pay attention to the breath, understand, or not even understand, just be with the breath in such a way that you're able to balance out the breath. Because the breath, in yoga, we say that the dominance of the breath is always shifting from left to right, right to left. And you can check this out even at home. You can check this out. If you just place your finger just underneath your nostrils and just gently exhale, you'll notice one side is more dominant than the other. And it could be right or left. However, that is always shifting from left to right. And that's because there is this play between the masculine and the feminine in our body. So one thing is, if you want to have some clarity, you have to balance that out. And the balance is everything. So if you pay attention to the breath, it will show you that. And there are practices that help you balance that out. And if you're able to balance that out, you immediately balance out your energies as well. So pay attention to the breath.
Thank you so much. And yes, reach out to Shubhan to know how you can create this balance and so much more. I'm so grateful for your presence here today. Thank you, thank you, thank you for sharing your wisdom, your story, your knowledge, and everything, your energy with us. To everyone who's watching us, thank you for watching this episode. Please like the episode, let us know your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel, and make sure you connect with Shubhan. Check out the description of this video for that. Take care. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.